Hey everybody, it's Dr. Montgomery and I'm here doing a video for you on how to write your lab report. So I've already got a template loaded for you in Blackboard. So if you go to your Blackboard page, you're going to want to click on this link, How To's, Templates, and Rubrics. And then you're going to click the lab report template. Once that opens, you're going to just create your lab report from directly within this template. There's already some guidance inside of the template for what you want to do and how you're going to write the report. Begin on the front page with the report title. Your first lab report is going to be on stoichiometry. So you're just going to title it stoichiometry, and obviously we're going to take away the quotation marks. If you'd like to, you could go ahead and open up the report and follow along with me while you do this. While I talk about it is what I mean to say. So you're going to put your name here, first and last, and then you're going to want to include your lab partner's name, and you want to make sure you have their first and last name as well. If you don't know their last name, go ahead and ask them the next time you see them and include it. The due date for your lab report, I believe, is not until next week. This is just your rough draft, but the date I think I have on your schedule is, maybe it's the 21st. So we'll put on here, for now, we'll put 3/21/18. And you guys are Chem 201. This is spring 2018. Okay, that's your first page title. That's what it's going to look like. And you're just going to go ahead and continue on in the same way. In your header, if you don't know how to activate your header, you're just going to double click up here in the top margin. So you double click, and then you're going to go ahead and put your last name and the name of the lab. So this is going to be whatever like so. Okay. In your introduction, you're going to state the purpose of the lab in 1 or 2 sentences. And the purpose is going to be different from the objectives. So make sure that you're clear on how that differs. I think we talked about this in class, and I mentioned like the difference between the purpose in your life and how you're going to want to achieve those purposes. The objectives are the things that you do to achieve the purpose. Usually in Chem 201, your purpose is going to be something along the line. It's like a learning objective. So it might be, in this lab, it might be something like to better understand the principles of stoichiometry involved in chemical reactions or something like that. So you're going to want to state that purpose in a couple of sentences, and then you'll go on to detail the specific objectives, how the lab was performed, and the details of how the purpose will be demonstrated. Also include a summary of any new theories or techniques that were used in the experiment. So in this case, you're going to want to talk a little bit about absorption spectroscopy. And make sure you also include any relevant chemical reactions or mathematical formulas that were used to do your data analysis. I want you to make sure that you go through your introduction, reread it a couple of times to ensure that it is clear and that there's a nice flow to it. So you want to link your ideas together and make sure that each idea in a paragraph is supporting the thesis statement in that paragraph. I will be posting a rubric to Blackboard that will help you understand the different points on which you'll be graded, so make sure you also read that rubric before you turn in your final draft. For your procedure, you want to write in third person past tense. So an example would be the sentence, a 50 milliliter graduated cylinder was used to measure 30 milliliters of 1 molar HCl. Now, the instructions in the lab itself probably said something along the lines of obtain a 50 milliliter graduated cylinder, measure 30 milliliters of 1 molar HCl. That's directive. It's not third person and it's not past tense. So you have to rearrange that wording. You can think about it as if you're telling a story. So what you want to do is write the story about what you did. What was the experiment, or what were the steps of your experiment? And this enables you to tailor what you write to the specific details of your particular experiment, and if anything went differently from the directions for the experiment, you're going to want to include that. For this rough draft that's due tomorrow, you can just write your introduction and your procedure. Okay, you don't need to continue on with your data and calculations and your conclusions and discussion section. There it is, discussion and conclusion. So on our next lab report, you're going to be turning in a rough draft that includes those points. But for your rough draft, for this lab report, I'm going to be focusing on how you're writing your introduction and your procedure. I did bullet these points here in the introduction, but that was just so that it was more clear, and I wanted you to be sure that you covered these specific 3 topics. Make sure that you don't use any bullets in your lab report, anywhere in the lab report, not in the intro, not in the conclusion, not in the procedure. Nothing should be bulleted in this kind of a report. So yeah, go ahead and write the intro and the procedure for tomorrow. It shouldn't take you that long. You probably have most of it already written in your lab notebook. Then, for your data and calculations section, you're going to want to include all raw data that you obtained during the experiment. Usually, you are going to have some tables that you built, and so you can just import those, especially if you did it in Excel. You can copy those data, cut and paste it, or copy and paste it directly into Word. So you just click in Word and drop it right in, and it'll build a table for you. I actually have an example of that. Let me show you. So here's some data here. We'll just take this for example. This was something I was doing for 202 earlier today. So I just highlighted these 2 columns of data here, and if I just hit Control-C, or if you're on a Mac, it'd be Command-C, and then I move to my Word file. I put my cursor wherever I want the table to be, and I do Control-V. Oh, well, I lied. Let's see, we're going to do a paste special, so let's see. Paste, it gives you the different options, the different ways that you can input the data. We don't want it input as a picture, we want it as a table. So something like that would work. The formatting is a little bit strange. Right now I have all of the paragraph marks shown, so that's kind of weird. I think part of what's confusing here is the negative symbol, but you can see that you can just cut and paste the table from your Excel file directly into your Word document, and then you can modify it as needed. Make sure that your tables are properly annotated. First of all, you need to make sure that you have a table caption, like so. And you also need to make sure that the units in your table are done properly. You don't want to have a unit in each individual cell if they're all the same. So for example, this column of numbers is all milliliters, and so it's best to put the unit in the heading and then not in each of the cells. So what you should do in this situation would be to go through and delete all of the milliliter marks throughout. Oops, not the number. Just the unit, right? So just delete all of the units and put the unit in the heading. Then if you have a graph, you're going to want to put a caption on your graph as well. Your graphs are captioned as figures, and you need to make sure that you modify your graph before you import it into your Word document so that it looks neat. You want the data of the graph to occupy the most space and the title and the axes to be small. So make sure that looks, sort of aesthetically smart and sharp, and it's easy to read. You must show one example calculation for each type of calculation that you do to your data. Okay, so for example, if you had to perform this type of calculation, you would show the formula, and then you would go ahead to show the actual numbers that you used for one set of data. So then you would go equals and, continue typing in your actual numbers. So one example calculation, make sure that you report the correct number of units, significant figures, and everything. Also make sure that for your formulas and calculations you're using an equation editor. Okay, I don't want you to do the linear in-text type of equations. They're very difficult to read. So we talked about how to do that. I think we did. We may not have talked about how to do using the equation editor in class. So I'll do another video in a minute for how to use equation editor if you haven't used it before. But for now, let me just say that I do want you to use that for your calculations, etc. In your discussion section, you need to report the significant results of your experiment. So even if you've shown that number in a calculation in your calculation section, you need to talk about it in the discussion section. So just having shown it isn't enough. You want to actually report the number in the discussion and talk about what it means and its significance. You're going to make sure that you talk about any error that is in that number. So if it's high or low, why? If you're going to talk about the possibilities for what could have made it high or made it low. And when you do that, you're going to want to look at any kind of mathematical formula that brought you to that answer, and think about how your different experimental steps could have made the numerator too big or the denominator too low, which would give you a number that's too large, and vice versa for a number that's too small. Make sure that you include references. You're going to reference, for this lab, you're going to these two references are what you need in your experiment, in your report. Okay, so actually, you know what? This reference I think is for the older edition of your textbook, so you're going to want to update that to reflect the is it 2015 edition, or is it really 2014? I'm not sure. But just make sure that it's an updated reference. And any other references that you may have used, if you had to look something up online, or if you used a different book, you're going to want to include here. So make sure you just have a complete reference section. So that's basically it. I think I kind of went quickly over some of this stuff. Make sure you go back through and read all of the information here. Pretty much everything you need to know is already in this template, so read through this and do your best to assemble, a decent lab report. And like I said, I'll be looking at your rough drafts of the introduction and procedure, so that's the only part that's due tomorrow. And once you have submitted your rough draft, I'll be taking a look at it and giving you some feedback on that. So that's all I've got for you right now. Let me know if you have any questions.